Hello, everyone, and welcome to this Easy Agile webinar, Tools and Tips for Easy Remote PI Planning. Thank you so much for joining us today, wherever you are around the world. We are Easy Agile, and my name is Sean Blake. I'm the Head of Marketing here at Easy Agile. And today we are joined by Tegan Harbridge, our Product Manager, and also Jasmine Ioannidis, who's our Product Marketing Manager at and it's fantastic to be able to speak with you today. We look forward to hearing your questions and running you through a few different things around PI planning. Well, what a time we're living in at the moment. Today, things look very different than they did 6 months ago, don't they? And it's posed a lot of challenges for our team here. We are an Atlassian marketplace partner. We have 4 apps on the Atlassian marketplace, and our apps are made to make Agile easier in JIRA. And today we're going to be talking about PI planning, specifically in JIRA, but also more generally. And we've prepared a few tips to run you through. And we've also got a few specific interactive tips about how to make PI planning easier in JIRA using Easy Agile programs for JIRA. So we hope that you find this webinar useful, and we look forward to speaking with you more about it both during this session and also afterwards. If you do have any questions along the way today, feel free to post them in the chat tab here on Livestorm. Jasmine will be also posting some questions along the way in the questions tab and also some polls. So feel free to get involved, and we'd love to speak with you about this topic. So there's a few things we've got as part of the agenda today. The topic is PI planning tools and tips. And today we've split it into 2 sections. So the first section, I'll be running you through 7 tips to make PI planning easier in this new remote world. And then following that, I'll hand over to Tegan, who will run you through how to do remote PI planning more effectively in JIRA. Let's jump straight in. Tips for remote PI planning. But the first thing we need to ask ourselves, and what I've been hearing from customers, and as I've prepared some research for this webinar along the way, is people are asking, is this even possible? Is it still possible to run PI planning in a distributed or a remote environment? PI planning spent at home with your children or your pets or your partner is not quite the same as the PI planning we were used to, is it? But the answer is, thankfully, yes. Yes, it is still possible. And we know this because our customers have been running remote and distributed PI planning for quite some time now, even before COVID-19 affected us all. So yes, it's possible, but wait, there's more. There's things we need to consider now that things have changed so drastically. So today I'm going to share with you 7 tips for easier remote PI planning. And these tips aren't things that we've just brainstormed in our heads. They're things that we've actually learned from speaking to our customers and by trawling the forums, speaking to experts in the field. So I hope that you find them valuable. The first tip for easier remote PI planning is get the basics right. Well, what does that mean? What are the basics? Well, let's start off talking about communication. Communication is so important in PI planning remotely. People need to know where they need to go to access all the information they need. We need to set up chat channels, heaps of them, so that people can access support, specific support for when they need it. We need channels where product managers can talk and collaborate with each other. We need chat channels or rooms where facilitators can talk to each other, both leading up to PI planning and during PI planning. And we also need a way for the teams to collaborate with each other on the day. We also need to be careful of the quiet voices. People who are extroverted during PI planning in person may no longer be comfortable speaking up if you're on Zoom or a video conferencing. So we need to be careful with that. Preparation is important. Scaled Agile actually did some research, and they found that release-trained engineers spent on average 6 days preparing for PI planning. Well, That was before COVID. What about after COVID, now that everyone's working remotely? It could be even longer. So we recommend setting aside perhaps 2 weeks to adequately prepare and get your teams trained and ready for remote PI planning. Execution. Well, if we're communicating well with our people, we're well prepared, everything is set and ready to go, the execution should flow, but we need to be prepared that some things will still go wrong. Technology will fail us. People will still have problems accessing the tools that we've set up for them. Some of the tools will fail, so we need to be prepared that execution won't be seamless, but if we get the communication right, if we're prepared, then things should run smoothly on the day. Okay, tip number 2, focus on the goal. So, why are we doing this? We still need to focus on the why. The main thing for PI planning is to get alignment for our teams. If we can achieve alignment, PI planning is still a success. Let's not get too bogged down in what tools we're using, how the agenda has changed. What's really important is we're still encouraging our teams to find alignment for the upcoming increment. Tip number 3. Set the agenda as early as possible. Why is that? Well, think about your people. They're working at home, they're working with their pets or their children or their partner or their family around. If they know that PI planning is coming up and what is expected of them, then they can give the people in their house more notice that they're going to have to concentrate during these periods. And that's going to be really important to get the most out of your people during these times. Also, it might be worth spreading out PI planning. Instead of holding it over 2 days, it might be better to split it out over 3 or 4 days. And that's actually a method that Scaled Agile are recommending at the moment. Let's not cram the agenda packed full of all the events that we need to hold. Let's make sure we have enough time for breaks throughout the day, breakout sessions. Maybe it's better to have 4 half days rather than 2 full days. I'm sure you've noticed it's actually really exhausting to spend all day on Zoom or in video chats with people. All of that screen time is not healthy for us. So let's give people a chance to make this a successful event. All right, the next tip is choose your tools wisely. Decide on what tools you're going to use and make sure everyone has logged in at least once and tested each tool before PI planning starts. Now, what tools do we need? Well, here's a bit of a checklist. We're going to need video conferencing, whether it's Zooms, Microsoft Teams. We're going to need some sort of team chat capability where teams can chat with each other and also collaborate with other teams. So maybe something like Slack or Microsoft Teams. Maybe you'll need a whiteboarding function when you can brainstorm it and start collaborating with each other. You're definitely going to need a PI planning tool, somewhere where you can track your work and manage your dependencies. And of course, we suggest Easy Agile Programs for JIRA is a great place to do that if you're already using JIRA. There are other tools out there that might be more suitable for you. And also, you're going to need a tool to hold a retrospectives. It's really important that we're reflecting on how this process is going and if it's working well for us. Perhaps something like Confluence would be sufficient for that. Tip number 5 for easier remote PI planning is practice. We're not going to get this right the first time. We're going to have to rehearse. We're going to have to work out how do we do things like our confidence votes. Are we going to use the poll function on Zoom or are we going to use Slack? We're going to have to practice and rehearse this. We're going to have to be flexible with our agenda and understand that this is really new for people. It's very different doing it at home than it is doing it in person in a conference room or a meeting room. And it's much better to finish early than to run out of time. So let's build in some slack into the agenda. Tip number 6 for easier remote PI planning is the importance of feedback and holding the retrospective. Again, we're not going to get this right straight away. So let's give our people a chance to communicate back to us, whether it's via retrospective or open up a channel for feedback. We're not just getting feedback on how did the last PI planning session go. We're also getting feedback on how are we finding working together in this release train remotely. What's working and not working. So keep it broad, gather a lot of feedback, and we can make improvements for next time we hold PI planning. Okay, lucky last, tip number 7 for easier remote PI planning is make it accessible. There are so many factors that are going to block people from really getting value out of PI planning this time around. We've got conflicting time zones. We're going to have trouble with setting up people on new tools, getting them access to the resources they need. It's going to be great if we have tech support available all throughout PI planning. It's going to be easier for some people than it is for others, but it's important. If things go wrong, we're going to need a backup in place. We can't have 100, 200 people sitting around with nothing to do, waiting for Zoom to work or waiting for Slack to work. Your tools are going to need to be reliable, and you're going to need tech support to help fix them quickly if things go wrong. Facilitation. You're probably going to need more facilitators than you normally do to be able to answer all of these questions throughout the week of PI planning. Do your people have access to coaching? Can we get more coaching and more facilitators to help our people through this process? And training. Some people may not be used to using the tools that we're suggesting that they use. So is there training available to help them get up to speed? What's the most important one here? It's probably access. It's probably access to the tools that people are comfortable in using. And really that's why we decided to build easy Agile programs for JIRA. We know that scaled Agile teams are already using JIRA to track their work in their release train. And that's why we thought, well, why not build a tool that helps people with PI planning in JIRA where they're already working? And that's a great segue now to hand over